It is with great pleasure here on the Matt Barrie Show on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel that I can officially announce the offseason is over. This college football offseason, it's the longest offseason in sports. We had realignment, we had portal, we had NIL. We can finally talk a little football. And to do that, heading into week 0, the great Dan Mullen, who will be with us all season long. He'll be with us in studio on Fridays and Saturdays. He and I are calling Thursday night college football this year. We're excited about that. But, Coach, we did it. We made it through the offseason. We finally have some actual football to discuss.
There's games being played this week, which is fantastic. And I know, the offseason, there's all this stuff that you got to talk about, that everyone loves talking about, and there's so many different phases of the offseason. And then there's so much from one week to the next, to the next, to the next. I think it's going to be such a great season of college football. The last, in a lot of ways, of a season, right? There's going to be so many changes after this year, but I think this is going to be a really, really exciting season.
Yeah, and I've talked about it before. I put it on my social medias. It's here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel of why we should enjoy this upcoming season for several reasons. And he just hit on them with the changes afoot in the sport that seems to have changes each and every week. So we're going to get into the week 0 games. I'm excited to talk about those. We're going to get into a couple of quarterback decisions that have been made, some that have yet to be made, and the dynamics of what goes in to selecting a quarterback. No one better than Dan Mullen to discuss that. Plus, we're doing this on Monday at 10:13 a.m., August 21st, August 22nd, Swamp Kings on Netflix. The docuseries about those Florida Gators of the early 2000s gets released. Coach Mullen knows it well, so we will get into Swamp Kings on today's show. But I want to start with week 0 in 2 games. There's a total of 7 games on the schedule, but there's 2 that pique my interest. And I want to start with the early one, 2:30 p.m. Eastern in Ireland, Navy and Notre Dame. Because to me, Dan Mullen, Notre Dame for the past few seasons has been a quarterback short of probably being pretty good. And that's no longer the case this year. They've got Sam Hartman coming in from Wake Forest, year 2 of Marcus Freeman. I think Notre Dame has the potential to be a team that we talk about well into November.
I think so. And they're going to have a chance when you have a veteran quarterback like a Sam Hartman that is played in big games, has been around it. They're going to have a solid defense under Marcus Freeman. I think one of the big challenges, though, this one in week 0, actually, is going to be a tough one. You're on the road in Ireland, so you have extra distractions. You're spending training camp getting ready for Navy, which there's the uniqueness of having to play them, and it can kind of throw off your training camp regular routine of having to get ready to play an option style team. So I think there's going to be some unique things that happen to Notre Dame in this game. Schedule plays out fairly well for them as the year goes on. They're going to have the challenges. They're going to have an opportunity to put themselves in playoff discussion with the schedule being strong enough. But unlike normal Notre Dame's, there's some down weeks where they have some kind of easier games this year. So they're kind of touching on all the bases where they're going to play the big enough names to get in. They're going to have a veteran roster, and they're going to have the break weeks to kind of regroup to what you need to make a run.
I love that Notre Dame, we had talked about that a couple of weeks ago on this show about how they're kind of the big fish left in the realignment pond, and we're not going to get into that, but Notre Dame, the fact that they're kicking off the season, they're legitimately the first at 2:30 Eastern. But I want to bring up their schedule because I think it's a great point. And it always is the case with Notre Dame because they still have the independent status with an ACC lean. They still do put together a schedule that come playoff time, they don't have to play in a conference championship game. So if they're in the barn at 12-0 or 11-1 with a decent schedule, when you look at it, Navy, they're going to beat Navy. Tennessee State week 2. NC State is a good game at NC State. That's good football. That's a noon Eastern on ABC. Central Michigan. Then there's the Ohio State game on September 23rd. Then there's the Duke game. Duke was a tough out last year, year 1 of Mike Elko. Louisville with Brom coming back. USC is loaded. We'll get to the Trojans in a minute. Pitt, Clemson, Wake, Stanford. Coach, that's a hell of a schedule.
Well, I think the fact you're playing a top team in the ACC in, one of the favorites in Clemson, probably, right there with Florida State. You're playing the favorite in the Pac-12 and if not co-favorites, and the same in the Big Ten. So I think those 3 games now, if they win all 3 of those, even if they trip up somewhere else along the way with the Dukes or the NC States, or Louisville, they're going to be a playoff team because they're going to have the quality. Now I do think I don't know that they'll win any of those 3 big games, and I could see, even though you expect a lot and it's not there, I could see an 8-4 finish for Notre Dame this year.
Is that the floor? I mean, because my expectation for them, when I do the look at the schedule and play the wins game, I think a swing game early is NC State at NC State, because I believe NC State, Brennan Armstrong coming in and I coming as the offensive coordinator, I think that's very much a swing game for Notre Dame. So for the sake of this conversation, let's say they get through that 3-0 at home against Ohio State.
Yeah, I don't see them getting through that one.
I don't either. I don't. Now, if Ohio State's got quarterback issues and they can't figure out who to get how to get Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't think that's going to be the problem. So we'll go 3-1.
Yeah.
Duke, another swing game, but I like Notre Dame in that one.
All right.
Even though Riley is a good quarterback for Duke, so we'll go 4-1 at Louisville.
Another kind of swing game.
5-1. We'll give them 5.
You're giving them all the swing wins. They're swinging in the right direction.
To me, it's like they're swing. USC comes to Notre Dame. So they've got Ohio State and USC in South Bend.
They're going to have, you know what? I mean, there'll be some rosaries being said in the stands. And when the USC comes kind of that late fall weekend, the weather can get nasty. They're going to need kind of that edge in that game.
So 5-2. I don't have them beating USC. Pitt comes to Notre Dame.
They'll win that one.
They'll win that one. And it looks like they have a bye week before Pitt to get over USC, whatever happens there. So 6-2. Notre Dame goes to Clemson. 6-3. Wake Forest comes to Notre Dame. We like that. 7-3. And then Notre Dame, Stanford. They're going to beat Stanford.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that's a 9-3 look. But you probably have them losing one of the swing games.
Yeah, 9-3, and then there's a chance you lose one of the swing games. I mean, you look, 9-3 would be a really good year. 8-4 would probably be a little bit disappointing for them. 10-2 would mean they, pulled off a big upset and be a really successful season.
I love that schedule though. When you really examine the schedule with what they have, I think Marcus Freeman, I think anybody would admit this. He's a good young coach, but I think he learned how hard it is to be a head coach at a food group university and a big brand in the early part of last season. But he's got an offseason under his belt, coach. He's got the recruiting stabilized. I think you'll see a little bit more from him this year. Tommy Rees out. It'll be interesting for what they do.
The one thing with Notre Dame that you have to remember, by being an independent, the only championship they can win is a national championship. And I think there's a lot of things that you miss with players that when loss number 2 hits for Notre Dame this year, they have really nothing left to play for.
Right.
There's no more, let's rally, let's win a champion. They're out of the playoff. They're out of the national title. They're basically playing for bowl placement or pride at the end at that point. I think that is difficult, and it's a difficult task that Marcus Freeman has to deal with. And one of the difficult things about being an independent is once you're not playing, you're really not playing for much. Once you're out of the playoff hunt, if you're Notre Dame, you're playing, but you're playing for a bowl placement or one of those.
Right. And look, and that's why that one year where they got the sniff during the COVID season of an ACC championship, people were wondering if that was good enough for them to say, hey, in October, November, we could still be playing for a conference championship game. And they
there's a lot to that. There's a lot to the player mentality of that.
Yeah. And look, and Notre Dame will sell that it's about Notre Dame and it's nothing's bigger than Notre Dame, but we'll see. They've got week 0 against Navy in Ireland. Game 2, I'm looking forward to. It's kind of a nightcap, if you will, 8 p.m. Eastern. Good luck trying to find it. It's on the Pac-12 network. San Jose State at USC. I've
Yeah.
been bullish on USC all offseason. Coach, I'm even more bullish after I was doing some prep this week for the season and was reminded of all of the portal players that Lincoln Riley brought in to be as a supplement to Caleb Williams. Marshawn Lloyd out of South Carolina, who was one of the highest rated running backs coming out of DeMatha High School. He is an absolute stud 5-star. He comes in. Jared Kingston to shore up the offensive line. He comes in from Washington State. Dorian Singer from Arizona at receiver, who's a game breaker waiting to happen. Then you've got Bear Alexander coming in from Georgia, defensive lineman, and Christian Roland Wallace, a DB out of Arizona. Mason Cobb, a linebacker out of Oklahoma State. These guys are loaded.
I think they're set. Now, the interesting thing that we're going to get to see, which I'm so excited about the Pac-12, they're all going to play each other. I mean, USC's schedule, even though this week, I think, you couldn't ask for more. You're playing a game that you really should win with a lot of new faces, and they might not look as pretty in week one as everyone's going to expect. And all of a sudden, I think the nice thing with a Caleb Williams, with some of these, they're not going to come out maybe and be clicking on all cylinders week one. But I don't think that's not the goal. You don't need to. With all these new faces, let's work everybody in. Let's work out the kinks. Let's get ready to go for the long haul during the season, because they're going to have a really tough schedule as it goes road. And, when you look at it, when you're playing all the top teams, you're going to get there. You're going to get to see them play Washington. You're going to get to see them play Utah. And you're going to get them to get to play that tricky kind of Oregon State sleeper game that's going to be out there. Arizona and Arizona State, I think, can have enough Deloria at Arizona quarterback to make plays. Those are your games when you're USC that, hey, we're thinking we're going to catch our breath. Arizona State, all the transfers coming in. I think those are going to be big games. They get a non-conference going, as we said earlier, at Notre Dame. They're going to be tested throughout the year. So I think it's great for them in this early part of the season for them. They open with San Jose State, Nevada, and Stanford. They're going to have a chance with all these new faces to work out all the kinks before it starts hitting. Because when it hits, they're going to have a tough schedule.
That back half of the season, look, if you're Lincoln Riley, you've got one of two ways to look at this. Part one, like, hey, thank you, schedule makers. First 6 weeks of my season. You mentioned those first 3. At Arizona State's probably going to be a little tricky because I think Dillingham's got them believing, and they're going to be a good offense because that's what he does. But they're going to win that game. They're going to go to Colorado. They're going to thump Deion in Colorado. And then Arizona, like you mentioned, they're going to be a little bit tricky. But after that, I like USC could go into Notre Dame easily 6-0. And then the back half of this schedule, as you just alluded to, they've got Notre Dame, Utah. They'll win against Cal, and then they finish with Washington, Oregon, UCLA.
Yeah. Unbelievable. It's going to be must-see TV. The Pac-12 is going to be
don't make me
must-see
sad.
TV this year. Like you said, the issue is the only benefit, we're not in studio covering all of it this weekend. The benefit we're going to have in studio is we get the Pac-12 satellite feed.
We do. So, we are the rare people that have found that bird in the sky that can figure out how to watch all that stuff out west.
So we're going to be able to sit and enjoy all of these games.
I mean, there are so many good ones. And here's what I'll say about USC. Because of the schedule and how good the Pac-12 looks this year.
Yeah.
And because of all those transfers that they brought in that I mentioned a second ago to supplement the talent they already had. If Alex Grinch, the defense, finds a way to use Bear Alexander, Mason Cobb, and Christian Roland Wallace, and finds a way for that defense to play, I don't think it's beyond the shadow of a doubt. In fact, I would put him in. I think USC is a playoff team. And I don't think it's close because of the schedule and the talent.
I think so, because I think this, and you have to remember, chances are, if they lose to some, with the exception of Notre Dame, there's a good chance if that happens, they'll get to redeem that game in the Pac-12 championship.
Yeah.
They'll get the chance to go beat the one team they lost to. And if that happens as a conference champion, and I think that's this, I live down here in SEC country, and it's just, everyone assumes Georgia's already in, and probably either Alabama or LSU. There'll be two teams in. I think the fact that the loser of the SEC championship game will not have that criteria of being a conference champion is going to put them at great risk to the winner of all of the other Power 5 conferences. There's 4 more conference champions that the loser of the SEC championship game has to beat and jump ahead of. And I think this is the year that I think you're going to have 4 conference champions in the playoffs.
I wonder if this is also the year in the Pac-12 swan song, because it looks to be so deep. Could a 2-loss Pac-12 team get in? We haven't seen 2-loss teams get in. Can a 2-loss team, depending on what it looks like, depending on what's going on in the rest of the country, because when you really look at this, but with Washington being a top 10 team, Utah's the 2-time defending champion, Oregon's going to be tough. I mean, this conference, Oregon State, they're pissed off. They're getting kicked out of the league. Like, it's going to be as deep as we've ever seen.
It is. And I think there's going to be enough non-conference games that the league can make statements and give enough strong teams, because, the SEC and a lot of what goes on is they've gotten the credit because there's so many good teams in the league. So you get credit for winning all of these conference games against great teams. And they are great teams. And the Pac-12 has that this year. So, I mean, USC is going to have a bunch of top 25, top 10 teams on the schedule for the resume. And whoever wins the Pac-12 is going to have that same resume with all of these, to win the title, you're going to have to win a bunch of games, and you're going to have a lot of wins against top 15, top 10 teams on your resume.
I just love that USC's sexy again. Like, they haven't been sexy USC in a long, long time. When you look at this roster and you've got the defending Heisman Trophy winner coming back, like, this takes me back to Leinart, Bush, Lendale White, Dwayne Jarrett. It takes me back to that era where these dudes were just like, USC was USC.
Yeah.
And
they are. The interesting one for them is going to be the defensive side of the ball.
That's it. Always is.
And, and the Pac-12, I mean, because I think, Washington can score points, and they're going to. Oregon, I think, is going to be able to score some points this year. And I think when you look at those two offensive, and then, you got to score enough to go beat Utah.
Yeah.
The Utah one's kind of a different deal of, you got to get a couple of stops because USC is going to score on just about everybody except for probably Utah.
Yeah, because Utah's the one team that'll slap them in the mouth, and will they be willing to slap them back?
Yeah, and the Utah game, you have got to, score enough against that and slow them down a little bit to go in a tough battle. I like it. I think USC is going to be a playoff team, and that's what's going to get really interesting, because you figure USC is a playoff team. The Big Ten champion's a playoff team. The winner of the SEC championship game's a playoff team. One spot left for the ACC, Big 12, and a loser of, you're sitting at a possible 11-1 Ohio State, Michigan loser.
They're getting in.
SEC championship game loser.
The
Big 12 champion and ACC champion.
I'm telling you,
who's out this year?
Right. Yeah. And that, when you just break it down like that, you would like to think Florida State. Look, if LSU gets by the LSU Florida State game coming up,
big one.
Losers fine. Now, winners in a great spot, but the loser of that one, so it's because it's so early and each team plays in a good enough conference to get through, I think they're fine. But that, to me, that one game, LSU Florida State, can do so much for the national championship of the college football playoff picture early in the season come November, because one of those teams is going to have a loss, and that thing is going to be dissected start to finish.
Here's the one. 12-0 Georgia loses the SEC championship game to 11-1 LSU or 11-1 Alabama.
So 12-1, 12-1.
Okay. You have let's say USC's, we already said USC, Michigan, both in. If that loss, LSU's loss, is to Florida State, who's an ACC champion, then who's on the outs?
Right. Then you go down, then you're looking at schedule.
It is going to be, I think this is going to be a year where winning that conference title is going to have a lot to do with getting in the playoffs.
And isn't it ironic too, because we know the Big Ten West is not good. The Big Ten East is loaded with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and sometimes Michigan State. But the committee, for some reason, if you look at body of work of Ohio State and Michigan in years where they've both gotten in like last year, the league was not good. It just wasn't. There were 2.5 good teams, and both of them got in.
Yeah.
And so, and TCU screwed it up for everybody.
Finding ways to, and then we're not even talking about who's going to be that team this year. I think the interesting one, now we do say this, for the first time in a long time, Florida State and USC have expectations that have not been around those programs in quite a long time.
That's right.
And how are they going to handle it? I want to say, you think of Texas, and Texas has that, the Texas-Alabama game. Someone's going to have a loss coming out, chance to still go play for a conference title, even be undefeated with it. And, these different things. But I think Texas has lived with that pressure constantly that USC and Florida State has not.
Yeah. And I speak, I think, for every college football fan out there. It's so good to see USC and Florida State back into that conversation of national elites, along with Texas, who's been trying to find their way for a few years. So those are some of the week 0 previews as we branched off into some big picture conversation about the season. Look forward to seeing USC and San Jose State Navy and Notre Dame. No such quarterback controversies at those two schools. Sam Hartman in for Notre Dame. We know Caleb Williams in for USC. A couple of quarterback decisions made this week. We know Carson Beck, he was named the starter at Georgia by Kirby Smart. We know that's going to happen. 2-time defending champs, no more Stetson Bennett. And maybe a bit of a surprise for me, Peyton Thorne, Michigan State transfer, going down to Auburn with Hugh Freeze and winning that job over Robbie Ashford. To me, that was a bit surprising because I didn't think that Peyton Thorne's skill set managed to fit what we see Hugh likes to do out of his quarterbacks. What were your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I would have thought Robbie Ashford, great fit, a little bit more of an athlete, stronger arm, has experience playing in the SEC, but Hugh likes to throw the ball, and you're gonna see. I know his quarterbacks. You used to seeing him kind of run around, be a little bit athletic, but he's big into the RPO game and being able to stand there and throw the ball down the field and make decisions. Down to in camp is the ability to push the ball vertically down the field within the RPO game. I think gave Peyton Thorne the edge, and why Hugh made that decision has got to be because of that.
Yeah, and we still don't know what's happening in Alabama, which starting quarterback Nick Saban's going to name. I would imagine it's going to be Tyler Buchner, the transfer from Notre Dame. If you follow and read tea leaves and offensive coordinator hires, Jalen Milroe, I've said, as a creative player, I think he's still going to be heavily involved into the offense. That's going to be one we watch here. We're taping this on Monday. This could happen this week while some of these clips are out there, but that's one to watch.
I think that one, I think Nick, and everyone goes to Nick as such the football tradition. Watched how Nick has evolved, and as one thing that's made him great is his never been afraid to evolve, never been afraid to try new things or make decisions. I wouldn't be surprised to see a multiple quarterback system this year at Alabama. I'm sure Nick will be, I bet we can find a video clip, but if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I bet you can find him saying that somewhere in the football logs in history. But I think this year he's not afraid to evolve. He's going to look at the skill sets of the guys he has. Let's put players in position, think outside to be successful. And I think he's going to do that.
You're the offensive guy. I mean, would you, as an offensive coordinator, former offensive coordinator, and a head coach that called plays, I mean, would if you were in Alabama's situation, did you want to have the one quarterback, or if you had two quarterbacks that both had really good skill and you wanted to find a way to use them? I mean,
I think that's part of the coaching thing. I have no problem with playing, if you have one quarterback that is great, this is our guy, we're going with him. That's fantastic. If you have guys that have different skill sets, it's not a bad thing to use them. What the key is, and everybody kind of gets all uptight on the outside. The guys on the inside know the plan. The guys that are sitting in that quarterback meeting know the plan and know what's going on and knows the strengths that each of the other one brings, and knows that, hey, if we use this guy's strength in these situations and we use this guy's strength in these situations, it's going to be the best for the team. And quarterbacks, and they want to win. People want to win. And the guys in that room. So I think even though it might look different on the outside, on the inside, everyone kind of knows the plan coming into the game. So it's not a surprise. It's not going to be a surprise to see Milroe go out there and run the ball.
right.
It's not. And we want to use some of this where Tyler Buckner's going to come in and say, okay, hey, I know and I'm going to be in certain situations, and we're going to utilize each other's strengths.
Dynamics of a quarterback competition, because you're the coach, but I want to throw this at you because I've heard this from other coaches before. They've always told me, we don't decide who starts at quarterback. The team decides who starts at quarterback because it's obvious in practice who they gravitate towards.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
I think a lot. I think you're looking at it. Who's going to give you the best opportunity to win games is what it comes down to, right? The quarterback, everyone's goal is to win football games. Who's going to give us the best opportunity to win games? And I think you'll look at a lot of situations that are out there where you have very, very talented guys that might not be starting. And it's like, okay, and we see some of these battles, and hey, this young quarterback's coming up, and boy, you hear so many special things, and he's so talented. But the guys that are there every day say maybe he'll be the starter even by the end of the year. But right now, this other guy gives us the best opportunity to win the game. And I think that's one of the toughest things that coaches deal with. And, I think that's when you look at all the different battles that are out there and that go on a regular basis, the coaches are looking and saying, boy, this guy can do special things. We got to build him up. We'd like to get in a position where he becomes the guy maybe by the end of the season. But right now, this other guy gives us, with the experience he has, with where we're at, he's going to give us the best chance to win the game. Refresh
my memory. Was that your situation, Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, a lot of that, we did. We had Anthony, and he would be jaw-dropping out there. And so we wanted to get him on the field. And you had Emory Jones, veteran, experienced guy, making good decisions, doing all of these things. And then you'd go watch Anthony come in, who was a human highlight reel, but would make some mistakes early on and was at that time, a really young player. So one of the things we would do is we're going to go in and say, hey, going into a game, even though they had some similar skill sets, you're going to go in the game and say, hey, Anthony, you're going to get the third series of the game and the sixth series of the game, 2-1, 2-1, and then we're going to go from there just to get everybody's feet wet and go play, especially early in the season. Or you're going to go in for these packages of plays. So there's always a plan to get him on the field, to build confidence and get him that experience, hoping that at some point at that season, he's now ready for all of it and ready to take over all of the responsibilities that come with being the guy at a primo program. And, one of the things we ended up dealing with at Florida, my last year at Florida, with that is that was a goal that we had. And every time we started to get ourselves ready to get to that point, Anthony ended up getting hurt, and he was out for the next game. Right. It was, I remember we were playing early in the year, playing South Florida. Alabama was home the next week. We were going to have we were even thinking maybe this is it. It's going to be time for him to go. Pulls a hamstring. He's out for 2 weeks, and then, the same thing happened a couple weeks later. So I think those are always tough for the coaches. you're dealing with all of those situations. But you're also looking at how are we putting the team in a situation to win right now, keep everybody's attitude in the right direction. And even though if we have these special players, how are we getting them on the field in those situations?
So that's an example of you saying the players inside the walls knew what was coming.
They know.
Knew that they were going to split reps, and there's zero chance, knowing you, there's zero chance you told the broadcast crew that there was going to be split reps. So when the game happened, everyone got all excited about AR-15, Anthony Richardson coming in, because at least the players knew the situation. So there wasn't any surprise within game.
I think the players, and when you say that everywhere, the players see those things, right? You know, the players, they can feel it and they know. Players are out there practicing. If you have a special young talent, they go look and say, you know, they know, they're like, wow, that was, they're like the other players, they're wowed by things that happen on the field. But they also know on an every rep basis, this guy might not be quite ready yet, but I can't wait until, you know, that kind of that feeling. I can't wait until he is, you know,
right?
That I can't wait till you see what these guys can do. And it's not, maybe not even at every position. I mean, you'll be out there at the running back position, right? And you're sitting there and saying, holy cow, when this guy gets the ball in his hands, this is unbelievable things happen. Now, he's not real solid on his protections. He goes the wrong way sometimes. You know, he doesn't really know the route tree yet. But boy, I can't wait until he gets in. At wide receiver, the same thing, you know, of like this guy right now, we put the ball in his head. You should see some of the plays he makes down the field. Now he's got to get consistency in his route running because, you know, I mean, we got to convert on 3rd and 6 every once in a while too. But boy, special things happen. So at every position, I think the players see that. So they know we're going to get this guy on the field, and they can't wait for something special to happen when he gets on the field, even if they're not ready to be an every down player.
Yeah, and look, and we always see it because coaches lock media out of practices, and so there's look, if you guys would just be more transparent, there wouldn't be all this outside speculation. I mean,
the paranoia is
you guys are absurd. You guys are out of control with your paranoia.
I real like now that I'm back out of it for a couple of years, I do realize like it is the paranoia that goes on. I mean, you're getting ready to play, you know, you're at Mississippi State, you're playing Ole Miss. I'm walking out to practice. I'm looking in trees to see if people are up trying to video things in trees. And like all of a sudden you like someone, like you see something out of a corner guy, someone like walking like around somewhere way off in the distance. And you're like, get security over to go check if they have a phone or something. And you know, the paranoia is crazy. And it's silly actually. Cause you know, you're watching the tape, you know what the other team's going to do anyway. They don't really do it in the NFL. The NFL one, if there is a difference, is they get the little microphone thing so you can talk like this.
Right.
So you are paranoid about signals and people stealing and knowing what you're going to do. When in the NFL, you can just talk in the headset to let everybody know.
Yeah, and you just said it. Like your game film is out there. They can send a coach to go to your game the week prior and sit in the stands and chart. Why are you guys so paranoid? What's there to be paranoid over?
I don't know. I think back on it and I'm like, you know, I mean, that added a lot of gray hair that I probably didn't need to have.
You didn't need it. You didn't need to be paranoid. Look, and I love having these conversations with you now because you are a couple of years removed, but you're still so current in the game. And I want to go way back having this quarterback discussion. Now, this might be a very uncomfortable discussion for us to have, but I want it to be completely honest because you and I both hold this player in high regard.
Yeah.
Tim Tebow. We hold him in high regard. He was a true freshman sensation. Chris Leak was the guy early on. There was the Tebow package, the jump pass. We know all of that. I want to get to that in a minute. But when we talk about special, is it not, how do I phrase this? How was it possible that Cam Newton was not the player at Florida that you're like, holy
Well, I think
That's the guy.
It is funny. You get to the quarterback deal first with people at two in a room when you had Chris Leak and Tim Tebow on a national championship team with Swamp Kings coming out. It's going to be really fun to kind of watch how this all played out. But Tim would come in sensation. We charted it. He played about 10% of the snaps and Chris played 90% of the snaps.
Right.
But Chris knew the package. And when Tim came on, he was going to do things that Chris really was not comfortable doing. And it made the team great. And that was a lot of pressure on Chris, but Chris was the one that got to hold up the crystal ball at the end of the season. And he knew that if Tim could come in and do these things, I'll get to hold the ball. I'm the one on stage that gets handed the ball. And that's part of the interior of the room that everybody knows. And it was hard for Chris because Tim would run on the field and the place would go crazy. And then when Chris would go back on, and it was a little not always that would happen, but that's the situation. I think when you had Cam Newton, so Tim's sophomore year, he wins the Heisman Trophy. Cam's a true freshman, and you're looking in this situation saying, okay, wow, this Cam's really talented. He can do some amazing things. Can't wait to get him on the field. Still young, still learning. So it comes into the next year. And I remember that in after spring practice and Urban's looking around the room. And he's like, okay, all right, quarterbacks, thinking it's going to be the quick conversation. Okay. Who's the best quarterback? I said, well, the most talented is probably Cam, and all of a sudden, just crickets in the room, and Urban, you could just see him kind of turn, if you know him, he gets a little bit red. It's like, oh, you better get the National Guard in front of your house if you're going to play Cam Newton over Tim Tebow. I'm going to make sure everyone knows where you live. And I'll make sure. And I said, listen, you said who was the best. I said, I think Cam is more talented. As Tim at that stage was way ahead of Cam. So, right. He's not going to, again, you're saying, hey, this guy on the bench is special. Now, granted, you're talking about two of the best players in college football history. And so there wasn't boy, Cam's going to go blow by Tim Tebow he's just he's so different. Tim was going to give us the best opportunity to win. Tim had the team behind him, but there are a lot of guys on that team, if you ask, that would see that Cam Newton and go wow, he is special. He can do special things. Tebow is the greatest college football player in history. If you look at his resume,
and I loved him. No,
you look at his resume, college football, and you look two national champions, 3-time All-American, Heisman Trophy winner, probably should have won more than one, but the fact they won't give him more than one, I think 2-time runner-up, 1-time winner. You hard pressed to say who's a better college football player in the history of the game.
I love Tim Tebow. He's a friend of mine. I love him. We work with him. We support him. We joke around with him. We have fun with him. Resume is one thing. I would go on record as saying,
I'm not saying most talented. He wasn't even the most talented guy on the team.
So you're just talking body of work.
Best Percy Harvin was hands down. It wasn't even close. The best football player on the team. Cam had more talent probably than Tim. And you saw it come out later in his career. Or extended NFL career. College football only. I'm somewhat biased.
Just a touch.
I can't. But he's the best college football player ever to play.
What about Reggie Bush?
Really good. He's up there, certainly in the discussion, but he didn't have 4 years.
Yeah. Because I bring this up, and this is a great conversation.
And no one will I don't think anyone will catch him because no one will play that 4th year.
No, not anymore. And I've gone on record now that it is a good conversation because you're talking about college football player. And
not talent, not
right. Because I've gone on record as saying
college football.
The Vince Young Rose Bowl is the single greatest individual performance in college football history. against USC and that USC team. So look, we could go on hours about this, but I can't wait. That's just a sneak preview of Swamp Kings. I think people are expecting it to be this very invasive, Aaron Hernandez tinged, all the characters on that team. It comes out on the 22nd, but you're saying that's not the case.
I think people will get a look inside of that team a little bit more. And the characters that are on that team are unbelievable. Now, were they all Tim Tebow's? Probably not. And you're going to see a lot of that. But you know what? I think when you look at all of the guys, and it's interesting, I think it's going to cover two different, the 06 national title and the 08 national title, very, very different teams. You know, there were kind of a group left and a new, so many different personalities. I mean, so many great people. I mean, if you just want to be around, I mean, that Percy Harvin, I think, is the most talented athlete I've ever seen. Probably the best football player I've ever seen, like is Percy Harvin. But you have the Pouncey brothers. I mean, you had Cam Newton there. You go back to the first year when you had a Brandon Seiler on defense, and then the next championship with a Brandon Spikes on defense. I mean, talk about just all of these different characters that are going to be part of this story is going to be pretty amazing.
So good. That's going to be on Netflix. Cannot wait to watch. Cannot wait to recap it with you. We will be, let's see, this is our final free week, and then you and I will be in studio 10 days from now doing the pregame show for Utah, Florida. It's going to be so much fun. Coach, great offseason. I can't wait to dive into the regular season with you.
I can't wait to get it going. I'm excited. We're going to have a lot of fun weekends coming up.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.